My name is Layla, and the first thing you should know about me is that for a long time, my heart lived a life my body was not allowed to live. By day, I was the obedient daughter, the quiet girl in the long dress and scarf, the one who kept her eyes down and her voice soft. I memorized the right answers. I quoted the right teachers. I knew when to nod and when to stay silent. On the outside, I belonged. On the inside, I was a traitor, not to my family, but to the God they said I must fear. My real life began at night, under a blanket that smelled like dust and old soap, when the house finally went quiet. I would lie on my thin mattress, my head turned toward the wall, and slide my hand under my pillow for the cracked phone I was not supposed to have. The screen was spiderwebbed from the time my cousin dropped it on the concrete, and one corner was held together with tape. It was old and slow, but it was my door out of this world. I did not mean to find the Bible. At least, that is what I told myself at first. It was just a file in a folder. One more thing downloaded by the girl who sold me the phone in the bazaar. She had whispered that it had a VPN, that with it I could see things the government did not want me to see. I thought of music, movies, stupid videos. Not this. Not a book I had been told was corrupted, forbidden, dangerous. The first time I opened it, my thumb trembling, I did it with the same guilty thrill as stealing sweets from the cupboard. I expected to feel dirty. I expected the words to sting my eyes. Instead, something inside me went very still. The letters were small, crowded together on the dim screen, but as I scrolled, I felt like someone was taking my face in their hands, forcing me to look at something I had spent my whole life avoiding. The words of Jesus were not like the slogans painted on the walls outside, not like the angry sermons blasted through loudspeakers. They were gentle and sharp at the same time. They cut me open and healed me in the same breath. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the persecuted. I read those words under my blanket, my body curled tight, my heart pounding so loud I was sure it would wake my sister lying a few meters away. It felt like someone was talking directly to me, not to a crowd, not to a nation, but to a girl whose world had always been small and suffocating. Someone who saw my hunger and did not despise it. I started waiting for night the way others waited for holidays. All day I moved through the house like a shadow. I helped my mother in the kitchen, washed dishes, swept the floor. I listened to my father complain about the government and praise the religion. People like him used to control women like me. I watched my older brother come home from the mosque with fire in his eyes, repeating the words of the preacher about enemies and purity and honor. I kept my mouth shut. My hands were quiet, my eyes were lowered. Only my heart rebelled. Every stolen minute with that phone became more precious, more dangerous. I changed the file name from Bible to recipes, so if anyone saw it, they might not be curious. I learned to tilt the screen so its glow did not slip through the gap under my bedroom door. I started sleeping with one ear always listening for footsteps. It was like having a lover, a secret the whole world would hate me for if they knew. Sometimes I would read until my eyes burned. I read about a woman caught in adultery, dragged before religious men who wanted to stone her. I read about Jesus kneeling beside her, refusing to condemn her, sending her away forgiven. I read about him touching lepers when everyone else backed away, about him welcoming children, about him speaking to women like they mattered. I read about him telling people not to be afraid. Do not be afraid. Those words became a flame inside me. During the day, when my father's voice would rise in anger, when my brother would talk about honor and shame, I would feel the phone under my pillow like a heartbeat. I would remember the way Jesus spoke in the stories, the way he cared for the broken, and I would think, he is not like them. He is not like the God they threaten me with. He is different. I did not tell anyone how I felt. How could I? In our house, faith was not a choice. It was the air we breathed, the rules written on our skin before we could read. To question it was to betray your family, your country, everything. To change it was unthinkable. But my heart had already changed. I started to talk to him in whispers when I was sure no one could hear. Not long, beautiful prayers, just pieces. Just my fear, my loneliness, my anger poured into the dark. Jesus, if you are real, if you see me, please do not leave me like this. Jesus, I'm so scared. Jesus, I want to know you. The words felt strange in my mouth, like smuggling diamonds instead of stones. I did not know if he was listening, but I knew that when I spoke to him, the weight in my chest eased a little. Living a double life is like breathing with one lung. Every moment feels fragile. One mistake, and you suffocate. The night everything shattered began like so many others. Dinner, dishes, my mother scolding my younger sister for leaving crumbs on the floor. My father watching the evening news, muttering curses at foreign leaders and praising our own for being strong against corruption. My brother scrolling through his own phone, a device he was allowed to have, watching clips of preachers and fighters. After prayers, my mother reminded me to check that the windows were locked, a habit born of fear of thieves and shame. No one must see the daughters of the house without their scarves. I nodded, walked from room to room, feeling the familiar tension in my neck. I wondered if tonight I would finish the story of the crucifixion. Last night I had read about Jesus in the garden, alone and afraid, asking his Father if there was another way, yet saying, "Not my will but yours." The thought made my skin prickle. By the time the lights went out, my entire body buzzed with anticipation. My sister fell asleep quickly, her breathing deep and even. I waited, counting slowly under my breath, the way I always did. 100, 200, 3. The house settled around us, wood creaking, pipes sighing. When I was finally sure the others were asleep, I slid my hand under my pillow. The phone was where it always was, a small, familiar weight. I pulled it out slowly, cradling it against my chest, listening for any sign of movement outside the room. Nothing. My heart beat faster. I slipped under the blanket, pulled it over my head, and pressed the power button. The screen lit my small tent of fabric with a soft, bluish glow. I opened the app. My thumb hovered over the last chapter I had been reading. My eyes moved hungrily over the text, trying to devour as much as I could before sleep pulled me away. The words about the cross were hard, full of pain, but there was something in them that felt like truth, like someone had reached into the ugliest part of the world and refused to look away. I did not hear the footsteps this time. I did not hear the door. I only heard my name, torn out of my father's throat like a curse. "Layla!" I froze. The blanket ripped away before I could even lower the phone. Cold air rushed over my face. The screen's light exploded outward, painting the whole room in pale blue. My sister jerked awake with a small scream. I blinked up into my father's shadow. His eyes went first to the phone in my hand, then to my face. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one breathed. Then he snatched the phone out of my fingers with a speed I had never seen from him. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice already rising. My mouth went dry. "It is nothing," I whispered. Just reading." He jabbed the cracked glass with his thumb, the app still open. The words of Jesus shone clearly between us. It might as well have been a confession written on my skin. "What is this?" My mother was at the door now, her scarf hastily thrown over her hair, eyes wide with confusion and fear. My brother pushed past her, his jaw already clenched, a vein in his neck throbbing. My sister huddled in the corner of the bed, clutching the blanket to her chest. "It is English," my mother said weakly, as if the language would make it less dangerous, less real. My brother stepped closer, peering at the screen. He could read it. He had learned more of the foreign languages than I was allowed to. His face darkened. "Baba," he said slowly. "It is the Injil, the Christian book." The room spun. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Injil, not a recipe, not a novel, not an accident, a deliberate, unforgivable betrayal. My father's hand shook around the phone. He turned on me, his eyes wild with a mixture of fury and something like horror. "Is this true?" he shouted. "Is this what you read in my house? In my house?" I tried to speak. My lips moved, but no sound came out. My brother did not wait for an answer. He lunged forward and grabbed my arm, fingers digging into my flesh. "You shame us," he hissed, shaking me. "You sit here reading the lies of the infidels while we pray for you, while we protect you." My mother started to cry. "Layla, tell them it is a mistake. Tell them you did not know." But I did know. Every verse I had read came rushing back, every whispered prayer, every stolen glance at the man who loved the broken. I could not pretend. Not now. Not with the words still glowing on the screen like a witness. My father's hand cracked across my face before I was even fully sitting up. The slap was so hard it sent stars exploding behind my eyes. Pain blossomed across my cheek. I tasted blood on my tongue. I grabbed the bed frame to keep from falling. "How dare you?" he roared. "How dare you bring filth into this house? Is it not enough that we have enemies outside? Now my own daughter becomes one inside." "I am not your enemy," I tried to say, but it came out as a strangled croak. He hit me again. The second blow caught my ear, a sharp burst of sound and pain. My sister was sobbing now, begging him to stop. My mother clutched her scarf with both hands, torn between reaching for me and staying back as the rules demanded. My brother dragged me off the bed. My knees slammed into the floor. He shook me so hard my teeth rattled. "Have you spoken to anyone?" he demanded. "Have you told anyone? Have you gone to their meetings, their churches?" "No," I gasped. I just read. As if that is better." He spat. My father threw the phone to the ground. It hit the concrete with a crack, pieces skittering in different directions. Then he ground it under his heel as if he were crushing a snake. "There!" he shouted. "There is your Jesus. Dust. Nothing." Each word felt like a lash. He grabbed my hair and yanked my head back. My scalp burned. "You will tell us exactly what you have read," he snarled. "Every word, every lie, every poison they have put in your head." "I read about him," I choked. "About Jesus. He loves—" The punch came from my brother this time, a fist to my stomach that knocked the air out of me. I folded in half, gagging, trying to suck in breath that would not come. My body curled on instinct, trying to protect itself. "Do not say his name in this house," my brother yelled. My mother's voice cut through the chaos, broken and pleading. "Please, please, you will kill her. For her soul," my father snapped. "Better she dies clean than lives as a kafir." Something cold and sharp settled in my chest then, beneath the bruises and the fear. They were not just angry. They were afraid. Afraid of a book on a broken phone. Afraid of a man who healed and forgave. Afraid that I might belong to someone other than them. The beating blurred into a series of impacts and insults. Hands, feet, words like dagger points. Whore for the West. Traitor. Shame. My world shrank to pain and the sound of my own breathing, ragged and wet. Somewhere in the midst of it, I thought, "Jesus, if you are real, I need you. I need you now." He did not stop the blows. He did not blow open the roof and carry me away. He did not strike them down. The only thing that kept me present was a strange, stubborn thought that wrapped around my mind like a bandage. They cannot take what you have put inside me. They cannot reach that. Eventually, their rage tired itself out. My father stood over me, chest heaving, sweat shining on his forehead. My brother's knuckles were red, his eyes bright with a satisfaction that made my stomach twist. My mother had sunk to the floor, rocking back and forth, whispering prayers through her tears. "I cannot keep this under my roof," my father said at last, his voice hoarse. "We are not like those weak families who hide their shame. We fear God." My mother looked up sharply. "What are you saying?" "I am saying she is sick," he said. "Poisoned. The authorities must deal with her. They will know what to do." Terror like I had never known flooded me. "Baba, please," I coughed, struggling to sit up. My body screamed in protest. "I am your daughter. I will delete it, I swear. I will never read it again." He stared at me, and for a brief moment I saw something flicker in his eyes. Pain. Conflict. The memory of the day I was born, perhaps. The first time he held me. Then it was gone, buried under years of teaching and pride. "You already have," he said. "You have read it. You have believed it. This is not a mistake. This is rebellion." My brother nodded, jaw tight. "If we do not report her, we share in her sin. They teach this clearly." My mother reached for his sleeve. "Please, give her a chance. She is young. She is foolish. She can repent." I wanted to tell her I could not repent of this, that what I had tasted was not poison but life. The thought of denying Jesus made my chest ache more than the bruises. But the words lodged in my throat. My father pulled his arm away from her grasp. I will not have the neighbors whisper that I hid a coffer in my house, he said. I will not stand before God with this stain. He straightened, as if that decided everything. I will go to the station in the morning. He walked out, leaving me on the floor like trash. The night stretched long and jagged. My mother cleaned my face in silence, her hands gentle but stiff, as if kindness itself might betray her. My sister cried until her voice went hoarse. My brother paced the hallway like a guard. I stared at the broken pieces of my phone on the ground, the shattered screen reflecting fragments of my swollen face. Under my breath, I whispered, "I am yours, Jesus." It was all I could manage. Morning came with an ugly light. I could barely stand. My ribs ached with every breath, my left eye swollen half shut. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my bruised neck, not out of modesty, but to hide the marks. It was useless. The shame in our house walked ahead of us like a shadow. They did not even give me time to eat. The knock on the door came mid-morning, sharp, official. My father had already gone out at dawn. When my mother opened it, two men stood there in uniforms that made my stomach clench. Religious police. Their faces were expressionless, eyes scanning the entryway as if dirt and sin might be visible in the corners. "Is this the house of Hassan Karim?" one asked. "Yes," my mother said, her voice a thin thread. "We received a report," the other said, "about his daughter." My brother stepped forward, shoulders squared. "I am her brother," he said. "She is here." My mother's hand trembled on the doorframe. For a second I thought she would slam it shut, pull me back, lock us in. But she did not move. "Bring her," the first man said. My brother turned and looked at me. There was no softness there. "Come." My legs carried me forward, even as every part of me wanted to cling to the doorframe, to my mother's dress, to anything solid. The hallway felt longer than it had ever been. The men's eyes swept over me, taking in my bruises, my downcast gaze. I forced myself to lift my head. They must not think I am afraid, I thought, though I had never been more afraid in my life. "Layla," my mother whispered, barely audible. I turned to her, hoping for something, a last look of love, a secret squeeze of the hand. Instead, I saw only terror and a kind of desperate obedience. She could not fight them. She did not dare. One of the officers took my arm. His grip was firm, not gentle. "You will come with us," he said. "There are questions you must answer." "Please," my mother said, her voice cracking. "She is just a girl." "If she is innocent, she has nothing to fear," he replied. We all knew that was a lie. They led me out into the street. The sun was bright, too bright, making everything look too sharp, too real. Neighbors had already gathered, drawn by the sight of the official vehicle parked outside. Old women peered from behind half-open doors. Men stood with their arms crossed, faces closed, as if they had always known something was wrong with our house. No one spoke my name. No one stepped forward. My father appeared at the end of the street, walking fast, his face set. He nodded to the officers, not looking at me. That hurt more than the blows. It was as if I had died already, and he was mourning a stranger. As they guided me toward the van, my foot slipped on a loose stone. For a moment I stumbled, my balance gone. The officer's hand tightened on my arm, keeping me upright. It was the closest thing to kindness I would receive from them. Inside the van, it smelled like old sweat, iron, and something else. A metallic tang that reminded me of blood and rust. The walls were bare metal, dented and scratched. There were no windows, just a small grate in the back doors through which a strip of light cut the darkness. They pushed me onto a bench along the side. The door slammed shut behind me with a final, hollow sound. The engine started. The floor vibrated under my feet as we pulled away. I sat there, my hands in my lap, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might shake the whole vehicle. The air was thick and stale. Every bump in the road jolted through my body, sending waves of pain from my bruises. I swallowed hard against the bile rising in my throat. Images flashed through my mind. The cracked phone screen, the man walking among the sick and the despised, his words about not being afraid, his promise to be with those who suffer for his name. Was I truly one of those now? A girl who had only read a few chapters in secret. Could that count as faith? I clung to it anyway. When the van finally stopped, the silence that followed the engine's grinding roar felt too loud. The doors opened with a squeal. Light flooded in, making me blink. A concrete courtyard, high walls, barbed wire curled along the top like thorns. A building with narrow windows and a door that looked more like a mouth swallowing the people who entered. The officer jerked his head. Out! I climbed down slowly, my legs stiff. The smell hit me first. Disinfectant and sweat and something foul, like old water trapped in dark places. The sound came next. Distant voices. A shout. A cry cut off too quickly. A door slamming somewhere deep inside. They led me down a corridor that seemed to get narrower with each step. The walls were stained, the paint peeling in places. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly, flickering glow. We passed doors lined with bars, some open, some closed. I did not look closely. I was afraid of what I might see. No one spoke to me. No one told me how long I would be there, what they would do to me, what I was accused of officially. I knew the word they would use. Apostasy. A word heavy with threat. A word that could mean years in prison, or worse. We reached a door different from the others. Solid metal, no bars. Just a small rectangular slot at eye level that was currently closed. One of the officers pulled a heavy key from his belt and shoved it into the lock. The mechanism groaned as it turned. He opened the door. The cell was a rectangle of darkness. The only light came from the hallway, spilling in a narrow strip across the floor. I could smell it before I could see it properly. Damp, mold, urine, fear, like a sour tang that clung to the back of my throat. Inside, he said. My feet felt rooted to the spot. For a second, panic rose so strong I thought I might faint. If I stepped through that door, I knew something would end. The life I had known, as narrow and painful as it was, would be behind me. Whatever waited inside was not meant to heal me. It was meant to break me. I took a breath that hurt my ribs and stepped forward. The darkness swallowed me in 2 steps. The air inside was colder, heavy with moisture that sank into my skin. The floor was rough concrete, gritty under my bare feet. I turned just in time to see the officer's expressionless face as he pulled the door shut. It slammed with a finality that shook the walls. The sound of the lock turning echoed in the small space. Then the light from the hallway vanished as the door settled into its frame. I was left in almost total darkness, my eyes straining, my heart beating loud in my ears. For a long moment, I just stood there, unable to move. The darkness pressed against my eyes like hands. I reached out blindly and my fingers brushed a wall slick with damp. I recoiled, my palm coming away wet. No one was coming to explain anything. No one was coming to comfort me. The last voices I had heard were those of the men who delivered me here. My family's house might as well have been on another planet. The world outside these walls continued, but for me, it had stopped. I sank down slowly until I was sitting on the cold floor, my back against the wet wall. My body ached. My face throbbed. My throat was raw. The smell made my stomach twist. In that moment, a truth settled over me with a weight I could feel in my bones. No human was coming to save me. Whatever happened next, whatever questions they asked, whatever they did to my body, I would face it alone. The people who should have protected me had delivered me here. The laws of my country had no mercy for someone like me. The cell was a mouth that had closed, and I was in its belly now. I pulled my knees up to my chest, wrapped my arms around them, and pressed my face into the hollow they made. In the suffocating dark, with the taste of blood and fear still in my mouth, I whispered the only name that had ever given me hope. Jesus! My voice shook. The sound barely rose above a breath. If you are real, if you truly see me, I am here. They have locked me away. They have forgotten me. If you do not come, I have no one. The silence that followed was complete. The cell did not answer. The walls did not move. I was just a bruised girl in a filthy box, talking to a man I had only met through stolen words on a broken screen. Terror wrapped itself around my ribs like a band, but beneath it, small and fragile as a candle in a storm, something else flickered, an underlying strength, a stubborn refusal to deny what I had seen in him. I was alone in that cell, But I was not entirely abandoned. Somewhere in the darkness, unseen, the story that had begun under my blanket was not finished yet. They came for me when I had lost all sense of time. In the darkness of the cell, I learned that hours without light turn into a thick paste in your mind. My stomach knotted and unknotted. My head throbbed in waves. Sometimes I slept, but it was never rest, only brief drops into blackness between jagged thoughts. The floor leached warmth from my body until my bones ached. I had no idea if it was day or night when the door opened. The sudden strip of light cut across the floor like a blade. "Stand up!" The voice was flat, impatient. I struggled to obey, my legs stiff, my muscles protesting. When I tried to push myself upright, my hands slipped on the damp concrete and I nearly fell. A hand grabbed my arm, fingers digging into already bruised flesh, and yanked me up. The hallway outside seemed blindingly bright after the cell. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled different here. Less like rot, more like chemicals and sweat. I stumbled as they marched me forward, the guards gripped the only thing keeping me from collapsing. We stopped in front of another door. This one was not a cell door. It was made of wood, scuffed and scarred, with a metal handle polished by many hands. The guard knocked once, short and hard, then opened it and shoved me inside. The interrogation room was a different kind of prison. The light was harsh, a single naked bulb hanging from the ceiling, its glare pooling on the table in the center of the room. The walls were bare, dirty white stained with yellow patches from years of smoke. The air was thick with the smell of old cigarettes, stale sweat, and something metallic that made my stomach twist. It was the same scent I had noticed in the van. Old blood and iron. A metal chair stood on one side of the table. Another chair on the opposite side was already occupied. The man sitting there looked ordinary at first glance. Medium build, dark hair combed neatly back, clean shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His hands were folded on the table, fingers long and pale. What was not ordinary were his eyes. They were cold, not the cold of indifference, the cold of calculated purpose. He looked at me the way a butcher might look at an animal before deciding which part to cut first. "Sit," he said. The guard pushed me toward the empty chair. I lowered myself onto it slowly, my ribs protesting the movement. The metal was icy against my thighs. For a moment, I focused on the sensation just to avoid looking at his face. "Name," he said, though he already had a file open in front of him. "Layla," I whispered. "Full name?" I gave it. The room seemed to shrink as I said the words, as if speaking my identity out loud here stripped it of any safety it ever had. He glanced at the file, then back at me. "You know why you are here." My mouth was dry. My tongue felt too big. "Because my father, he reported me." "For what?" he pressed. I swallowed. "For reading the Injil." A corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "For apostasy," he corrected calmly. "For abandoning the true faith. For embracing the lies of the Christians." I did not answer. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Do you know how serious this is?" he asked. "Do you understand what you have done to your family? To your community?" My mind flashed to my father's face, the disgust, the fear, my brother's clenched jaw, my mother's tears. Shame washed over me, thick and heavy, but beneath it, a smaller, stubborn thread pulsed. I had not betrayed them to hurt them. I had simply followed a voice they could not hear. He tapped the file with one finger. "You are young," he said. 18, 19, 19, I said. 19, he repeated. Old enough to know better, but still young enough to be corrected. The way he said the word made my skin crawl. He opened a drawer and pulled out a sheet of paper, crisp and white, in stark contrast with the stained table. He laid it down between us and slid it toward me. A pen followed, placed neatly on top. "I want you to read this," he said. My eyes flicked over the lines. The text blurred at first, my vision still adjusting to the light. Slowly it came into focus. It was written in formal language, the kind used in official documents and religious statements. "I, Layla, daughter of Hassan, confess that I have been misled by foreign influences and corrupted texts. I confess that I have turned away from the true path of Islam, and have pretended to follow the teachings of Jesus, who is merely a prophet and not Lord. I renounce this error and declare that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. I ask forgiveness from God, the state, and my family. My heart clenched. This was not just a confession. It was a burial of everything I had discovered in the quiet of my room. It was a way to make what had happened small and dirty, a phase, a mistake, a sickness cured by humiliation. You will sign this, he said. Then you will recite the Shahada for me, clearly, without hesitation. We will note your repentance. You will return to your family. They will be informed that you have come back to the right path. It sounded so simple when he said it, like a test with obvious answers. My fingers trembled in my lap. For a moment, a wild thought flared in my mind. I could do it. I could say the words. My lips knew them. I had said them 1,000 times before without thinking. I could sign the paper, nod, go home. I could live. He watched my face, reading the struggle there. Do not be foolish, he said, his voice softening in a way that frightened me more than anger would have. You are not the first girl to be deceived by foreign lies. You will not be the last. We can fix this. Your God will forgive you. You are confused, that is all. My God, I thought, the words echoing strangely in my mind. My God. He leaned forward. The smell of cigarettes intensified. Listen to me, Layla, he said quietly. No one knows you are here except your family and us. No one is coming for you. The Christians you think you are following will not rescue you. They do not even know your name. Your God has abandoned you. If he were real, would you be here? Be logical. Be smart. He pushed the pen closer. Say the words. Sign. And this ends. Jesus, I thought. Where are you? Memories flickered. The cracked phone. The Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness. The garden. Not my will, but yours. The cross. Father, forgive them. I stared at the paper. The letters danced in front of my eyes. Something tightened around my throat. The room felt smaller. The air thicker. My hands were shaking so badly I had to curl them into fists to hide it. Say it, he urged. There is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. Say it. Then we sign and you go home. This is your last easy chance, Layla. After this it becomes more difficult. I opened my mouth. For a few seconds nothing came out. The words of the creed sat in my mind, familiar and heavy. I imagined them on my tongue, imagined letting them fall, imagined the relief, the way the tension in the room would drop. I imagined my father's face if I walked back through the door. Then another set of words rose up inside me, unbidden and quiet but stronger than everything else. Jesus is Lord. I had read it more than once in that secret night world. I had rolled it over my tongue in silence, tasting its dangerous weight. It had felt like treason and truth at the same time. I swallowed hard. My heart hammered so loud it was all I could hear for a moment. I did not shout. I did not preach. My courage was not a blazing fire. It was a trembling, flickering thing, barely holding together. But I could not make myself say that he was merely a prophet. I could not deny what I had seen of him in those stories. The way he touched the unclean, forgave the guilty, claimed authority over life and death. I cannot, I whispered. The interrogator's eyes narrowed. What did you say? I cannot, I repeated, my voice shaking. I believe in Jesus. I cannot deny him. The air in the room changed. The softness in his tone evaporated, replaced by something harder, colder. He leaned back slowly, his gaze never leaving my face. The silence stretched, pulling tight like a wire. He nodded once to the guard by the door. The next moments came in fragments. A hand fisting in my hair, yanking my head back. The edge of the table digging into my ribs as they slammed me forward. The first blow across my back, exploding in pain, making my vision go white around the edges. My own voice, a strangled sound, torn out of my throat without my permission. Do you think he can hear you here? The interrogator's voice said somewhere above me, steady, almost bored. Your Jesus. Another strike. My body jerked. My teeth clacked together. The chair scraped across the floor, metal shrieking. This is what happens to those who follow foreign gods, he said. Do you think your missionaries will come for you? Do you think they even remember you? You are nothing to them. You are nothing to us unless you obey. Hands on my shoulders, forcing me upright. A slap across my face that left my cheek burning. The taste of blood as it filled my mouth metallic and thick. My breathing coming in ragged gasps. "Say it," he demanded. "Say the creed. Deny him." Tears burned in my eyes. Part of me wanted to scream, to agree, to say anything that would make the pain stop. Another part, deep and shaking, clung stubbornly to the memory of that quiet voice in the night saying, "Do not be afraid." I cannot. I managed, every word scraping my raw throat. I did not shout, "Jesus is Lord," like a hero in a story. I barely got the words out. "He is my Lord." The fury in the room sharpened. The blows became harder, more focused, my back, my sides, my thighs. The breath was driven from me over and over. My world shrank again to impact and sound and the ringing in my ears. Somewhere in the blur, they pulled my scarf roughly, exposing my hair, my neck, my humiliation. Laughter, low and cruel, as they commented on my shame, on how little my modesty mattered here. I was an object in that room, something to be broken and reshaped. The interrogator did not shout. His cruelty was measured, controlled. He asked the same questions in different ways, again and again. Who gave you the Bible? Who else have you told? Have you met with other believers? Give us names, churches, foreign contacts. Each refusal brought fresh waves of pain, not just from blows, from the way they stripped away pieces of my dignity, from the way they spoke about my body, my worth, my faith as if they were things to be traded, crushed, owned. I felt less than human, like some animal dragged onto a table. At some points, the questions blurred, the room tilted. My own body felt distant, as if I were watching from far away. The pain became a constant roar, a blinding white noise that swallowed everything else. I could not feel where one bruise ended and another began. I do not know how long it lasted. Minutes, hours, a lifetime. Somewhere in the middle of it, I realized my prayers had fallen apart. At first I had tried to whisper them between blows. Fragments of psalms I had half memorized. Snatches of the Lord's Prayer I had found in the text. "Jesus, help me. Jesus, stay with me." But as the pain grew, as my mind fractured, the words scattered. All that remained was his name, clung to like a piece of wood in a storm. Jesus. They grew tired before I did. Eventually, the interrogator stood. He smoothed his shirt sleeves, not out of necessity, but as a gesture of control. I hung between the hands holding me upright, my legs barely remembering how to support me. "We will continue tomorrow," he said calmly. "Perhaps by then you will be ready to be reasonable. Pain is a persuasive teacher, Layla. Your Jesus will not save you from it." He nodded to the guard. They dragged me out of the chair. My feet scraped the floor as they pulled me back down the hallway. The lights overhead blurred into a streak. The smell of smoke and blood and sweat followed me like a stain. We reached my cell. The door groaned open. They did not place me gently on the floor. They threw me. The impact knocked whatever breath was left in me out of my lungs. My cheek hit the concrete. Pain flared through my side, my shoulder, my ribs. For a moment I could not move. I lay there in a crumpled heap, my body one incoherent scream. The door slammed shut behind me. The lock clicked. Darkness rushed back in, pressing against my eyes, my mind. The air felt thicker now, heavier with the smell of my own blood mixed into the damp. Every attempt to shift sent new waves of agony through me. My skin felt too tight, my muscles trembled without my permission. I curled in on myself slowly, inch by inch, gathering my limbs close, trying to find some position where the pain did not roar quite so loudly. There was no comfortable place, only degrees of suffering. I tried to pray. I tried to find the words that had comforted me under my blanket at home, the verses I had read, the promises. But my mind was like shattered glass. Every time I reached for a coherent thought, it cut me. Images flashed instead. My father's face as he looked away, the interrogator's cold eyes, the piece of paper I had refused to sign, the blood on my tongue. "Jesus," I croaked, my voice barely more than a breath. "Jesus." Nothing answered. No warmth spread through my limbs. No voice spoke from the dark. No hand touched my bruised skin. The cell felt like the entire world, and in that world, I was alone. Doubt slithered in, thin and whispering. Maybe they are right. Maybe he has abandoned you. Maybe he is too far away. Maybe you are a fool. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears running hot down my dirty face, mixing with sweat and blood. The pain was a wall between me and everything else. I could not climb it. I could not see over it. In that moment, I felt more forsaken than I ever had in my life. No family, no friends, no church, no Bible, no phone. Only a battered body on a filthy floor and a name I could barely speak hanging in the air like a fading echo. Jesus. If he was there, I could not feel him. If he was watching, he did not intervene. All I had was the memory of his eyes in the stories I had read, the way he looked at the suffering, the outcast, the condemned. I clung to that faint recollection like a splinter in my hand, small and painful and the only thing keeping me from slipping entirely into despair. I lay there, shaking, sobbing quietly into the cold concrete, tasting iron and salt, and knew that this was the deepest darkness I had ever known. And somewhere beyond my senses, beyond the reach of the interrogator and the walls and my broken thoughts, something waited. But in that moment, I did not feel it. I felt completely alone. I thought I was going to die on that floor, lying in the darkness of the cell, curled into myself like a wounded animal. Every breath felt like a mistake. The concrete was damp beneath my skin, the moisture seeping into my bones. My body was a map of pain. Every place where they had struck me burned, throbbed, ached. When I shifted my leg even slightly, something tore inside. My mouth tasted of blood and rust. The smell of the cell clung to me. Urine, mold, old filth. I could smell my own shame mixed with the sweat and dried tears. I whispered his name, but even that name was starting to sound distant, as if I were calling to him from underwater. Jesus. Sometimes no sound came out at all, just the movement of my lips. The pain was so great that my thoughts slipped away, broken. A part of me, the part that could still think, began to ask the question I had been afraid to ask. Was it worth it? This? All of this? For him? For those words on the cracked phone screen? For that man who touched lepers and forgave prostitutes? For that face I knew only through imagination? I was here, in this hole, because I could not say he was merely a prophet, because I could not call a lie what had touched my heart. Lying there, my body shaking, I whispered, barely audible, was it really worth it? The question wounded me more than the blows had. I had been certain, back in the dark room under my blanket, that yes, it would be worth anything. Promising is easy when your skin is still intact. But now my body hurt, my face burned, and the future looked like an endless corridor of other rooms like that interrogation chamber. I thought of my parents, of my mother huddled in the corner of the room, of my father's gaze. I thought of their touch that night, not as comfort, but as blows. The ones who should have protected me had delivered me here. The ones who should have loved me had called me a stain. Why did you let this happen? I murmured, my voice failing. I believed in you. I read your words. I spoke to you in the dark. Why did you not take me out of here? Why did you not defend me? The tears came again, burning in the cuts on my face. I curled tighter, trying to make myself as small as possible, as if I could disappear inside myself. I looked at my torn clothes, dirty, stained with blood, my skirt torn at the knee, my scarf twisted, fallen, my hair exposed, stuck with sweat. I felt a shame so deep it seemed physical, a weight on my chest like a hand pressing down. I felt dirty, not just on the outside, inside, as if somehow I had failed him, as if, because I was afraid, because for 1 second I wanted to go home and sign that paper, I had ruined everything. I thought that maybe I was not strong enough for him. That maybe he had heroes, real martyrs, people who confessed him smiling while they died, and I was nothing but a frightened girl trembling on a prison floor. Maybe you are with others, not with me, I whispered. Maybe I am not worthy. The silence answered. The cell seemed to shrink. The smell of open sewage, of wet cloth, of dried blood seemed stronger, sticking in my throat. The cold rose from the concrete and entered through my back. I shivered, not just from cold, but from abandonment. The idea pierced me like a thin knife. What if everyone is right? What if he does not come? What if he never heard? It was then that something changed. Not suddenly like a door slamming, but like a wind that starts weak and grows. First, it was the smell. I did not notice right away. I only noticed that for a brief moment I could breathe without feeling nauseous. The odor of urine, of mold, of rust began to grow more distant, as if someone had opened an invisible window somewhere. In place of that heavy stench, another scent began to emerge, very soft. It was not disinfectant. It was not smoke. It was like roses, or rain falling on dry earth, a clean smell, alive, that did not belong in damp walls and dirty floors. I inhaled involuntarily and my chest hurt, but with the pain came a desire to cry in a different way. Next, the cold changed. I was still lying on the same floor, with the same bruised body, in the same cell. But the ice of the concrete beneath my skin began to lose its grip. The air, which before had seemed cutting, began to grow warm, like when the sun enters a room in the morning. It was not suffocating heat. It was a gentle warmth that seemed to come from all sides at once, as if someone had placed an invisible blanket over me. My body still hurt, but something in the atmosphere of the cell had been altered. The darkness no longer seemed so thick. I opened my eyes, which I had not even realized were closed. At first I thought it was in my head. Then I saw that it was not. A soft glow was being born in the corners of the room. It was not like the harsh lamp of the interrogation room, which hurt the eyes and threw hard shadows on everything. It was a light that seemed to have patience. It started timid, almost as if embarrassed to intrude, spreading through the corners, drawing the walls that had been invisible before. It did not come from a lamp. It did not come from a window. It was just there, emerging, like luminous mist. With each breath I took, that light seemed to grow a little, enveloping the stains on the floor, the cracks in the wall. Even the moisture dripping from the concrete began to shine, as if someone had hung stars on the water drops. I blinked, trying to understand. For a moment I thought I was delirious, that the pain, the lack of food, the fear, had broken my mind. I lifted my head a little, and even that small movement made my body protest. The light did not disappear. On the contrary, it seemed to respond to my awareness of it, gently growing clearer. It was then that I realized I was no longer alone. I did not hear the door open. I did not hear a key or footsteps in the corridor. Even so, someone was with me. I felt it before I saw it. The presence filled the cell in a way different from the guard, different from the interrogator. It was not a weight of threat. It was a weight of importance. As if the air had become denser just to contain whoever had just arrived. I turned my face with effort, and he was there. A man sitting on the floor, next to me. Not standing, looking down, like the guards. Not behind a table, like the interrogator. He had chosen the same level as me. The same hardness of concrete. The same filth. He was so close that, if I stretched out my hand, I could touch the fabric of his clothes. He was wearing white. Not the hard white of uniforms, nor the rough white of hospital bandages. It was a clean white, but not aggressive. A simple fabric falling in soft folds over his body, touching the dirty floor without seeming to get dirty. The light seemed to be born in the clothes themselves, as if the fabric were a cold flame. For a moment I could only look at his hands. They were a worker's hands, not delicate. There was strength in them. They were not soft hands of someone who had never touched anything heavy, but they were not closed in fists either. They were open, resting on his knees with relaxed fingers. Hands that knew how to hold a hammer. Hands that knew how to touch a wounded person. I raised my gaze. His face was harder to look at than any violence, not because it was terrible, but because it was too true. It was not that distant face of old images, without expression. It was a living face with eyes that carried sufferings I could not measure, and at the same time a tenderness I had never seen in anyone in my family, in anyone in the mosques, in anyone on the streets. His eyes met mine. I expected to find judgment, perhaps. A question. Why did you doubt? Why did you want to go back? Why did you complain about the pain? I expected to see that kind of severity I knew well, the kind that measures a person's worth before deciding how much she deserves to be beaten. What I saw was pain, not mine, his. He looked at me like someone who feels in his own skin every mark on mine, as if every bruise on my body had left a purple mark on his as well. There was sorrow in those eyes. Sorrow not for my weakness, but for what they had done to me. It was as if he said, without words, I saw every blow. At the same time, behind that deep sadness, there was something like intact strength, a quiet power, as if nothing in that place could intimidate him, as if the walls, the guards, the laws were, before him, as fragile as wet paper. He was sitting on the floor of a prison, and yet it was as if it were a throne. My first impulse was to shrink back. I tried to turn my face, hide my swollen face, my black eye, my cut lips. I tried to pull the torn fabric of my skirt, cover my knee, hide the marked skin. I felt so unworthy to be seen by him like that, dirty, broken, with torn clothes, tangled and exposed hair. The instinct of shame spoke louder than the pain. I raised a trembling arm, wanting to hide my face. Do not look at me, I thought, my heart racing. Not like this. Not after this. I am too small. I failed. I was afraid. I complained to you. I doubted. I felt dirty. Do not look at me. I could not speak those sentences aloud, but I felt them all at once like a silent scream in my chest. He leaned forward, slowly, without hurry, without making any sudden movement, like someone approaching a wounded bird that might flee at any sound. His hand moved, crossing the small space between us. I pulled my shoulder back, expecting more pain. My body reacted as if any touch were another blow. But when his fingers touched my skin, it was not like the heavy hand of the guard. It was not the rough grip of my brother. It was not the cold grasp of the interrogator. He placed his hand on my bruised shoulder, the place where one of the blows had hit with the most force. The flesh there burned. I felt every fiber protest when I breathed. I thought I would scream when he touched it. Instead, something happened that I did not even know how to describe. His touch was like cool water on a burn. Not the kind of water that shocks with cold, but the kind that has the exact temperature to take away the fire without hurting. It was as if a silent fire burning under my skin was extinguished in the same instant. The pain did not diminish gradually. It simply disappeared. 1 second before, my shoulder was a central point of suffering. The next second, it was just part of my body, light, almost forgotten. The relief was so abrupt that my hands opened, my fingers stretching on their own, as if my body found strange the absence of that constant pain. From the touch on my shoulder, the sensation began to spread, like gentle waves, leaving that point and spreading through the rest of my body. The warm heat that had already filled the air went deeper, reaching my chest, my ribs, my legs. Where it arrived, the pain retreated, the muscles relaxed, the throbbing diminished. It was as if my body itself recognized who was touching it and surrendered. I let out a short sob, almost a moan, but it was not just from pain. It was as if my soul had been startled by relief. He did not remove his hand immediately. He left it there, firm, but without crushing weight. It was not a touch of examination, of inspection. It was the touch of someone who is present. I felt that if someone opened the door at that moment, they would see a dirty prisoner and a man in white touching her with the same naturalness with which one embraces a child. When I finally gained the courage to look again at his face, the eyes that met me were wet. Not because he had pity for me like someone who thinks himself better. He was crying with me, crying for me. His voice broke the silence. It did not come like thunder or like a shout from the mosque loudspeakers. It did not need to fill the space. It only needed to fill the place where I was. It was a voice that seemed to come from very far away, and at the same time from the closest place of all, right next to my ear. Daughter. The word entered me as if it had been written on my chest. I had never heard anyone call me that in that way. My father called me daughter, yes, but there was always the weight of possession with it, of family honor, of obedience. In his mouth, daughter was also my responsibility, my shame, my property. In this man's mouth, it sounded different. It was a calling, not a possession. a recognition of what he had chosen me to be. Not just creature, not just servant, but daughter. Belonging not by merit but by love. My eyes filled with tears in a new way. Daughter, he repeated, and I felt that the word tore away, one by one, the lies that had accumulated around my name. Cursed, traitor, shame, infidel. With one word, he renamed my place in the world, not just in my family, but in his family. You are not alone. He did not need to raise his voice for me to believe him. The walls remained the same. The door remained locked. No guard fell dead outside. But, in that moment, the loneliness that weighed on my chest like a stone gave way. I have been here the whole time. I thought of the hours in the dark, the beatings, the screams, the foul smell. I thought of every moment when I had called for him and received only silence in response. But I did not feel you, I wanted to say. The words choked, but he seemed to hear anyway. I have counted every tear. When he said this, something in me collapsed completely. It was not a figure of speech. I realized with a clarity that did not come from me that he was speaking literally. Every drop that had fallen from my face in that cell, every muffled sob, every swallowed groan, he had seen, had counted. None had fallen to the floor without him knowing. No one else had done that. Not my family, not my accusers, not those who claimed to speak in the name of God. Until then, my cries had been a cause of irritation or disdain. There, in that transformed cell, I discovered that someone had noted them as if they were precious. I saw when they beat you, his gaze said. I heard when you called me in the dark. I was with you when you thought you were completely abandoned. I wanted to say, but why did you not stop it? The question burned. He seemed to hear that one too. The sadness in his eyes increased, but behind it there was something like conviction, a purpose I did not yet understand, as if he were with me not to erase the past, but to transform it, to mark it with another story that went beyond the blows. His hand squeezed my shoulder lightly, and the touch was like anchoring a boat in the middle of a sea that had suddenly stopped trying to swallow me. You are mine. Those were not the exact words he spoke aloud, but it was what my soul understood. Daughter, not alone. Tears counted, all of it spoken by someone whose presence made the cell seem too small to contain him. There, on the floor of a prison reeking of sewage, with my clothes torn and my eyes swollen, I knew that I was in a place the world would call cursed, but which, because of him sitting next to me, had become holy. The cell did not disappear, but it was no longer just a cell. It was the place where Jesus sat on the floor with me, called me daughter, placed his hand on my wound, and said that I had never been invisible, that no pain of mine had been wasted, that he had counted every tear. I woke up thinking it had all been a dream. For a few seconds, I did not know where I was. There was only the awareness of my own breathing, steady, deep, moving in and out of lungs that did not hurt. The cold of the concrete under my back felt real, but it was no longer biting through to the bone. My thoughts floated between sleep and waking, clinging to the memory of his hand on my shoulder, his eyes calling me daughter, his voice saying he had counted every tear. Then the smell of the cell returned, and with it, reality. I blinked my eyes open. The light was dim, a grayness seeping in through some unseen crack, enough to outline the corners of the small room. The gentle glow that had filled it when he was there was gone, like a candle after it has been blown out. For a moment, panic flickered. Had I imagined everything? Had my mind created him to survive? I shifted to sit up. The movement was so easy I did not register it at first. I pushed my palms against the floor, and my body rose without protest. No stabbing in my ribs, no tearing pain along my back, no weakness in my legs. I straightened completely, my spine aligning, and still, nothing. Just the stiffness of someone who had slept on hard ground, nothing more. My heart beat faster. Slowly, almost afraid of what I would find, I raised my hand to my face. The night before, every touch had sent a shock through me. Now my fingers met smooth skin. My cheek, which had been swollen and hot, felt normal, cool under my fingertips. I traced the path where I knew a bruise had bloomed near my eye. There was no swelling, no tenderness. I looked down at my arms. In the faint light, I could see the places where purple and blue had smeared the skin like ugly shadows, except they were not there anymore. The skin of my forearms was unmarked, pale where the sleeves had covered it, a little dirty where the grime had stuck, but whole. I pressed my thumb into the spots I remembered most clearly, the ones that had throbbed every time my heart beat. Nothing. No pain. My breathing grew short, not from injury, but from wonder. I touched my shoulder, the one that had seemed to hold all the agony of the previous day. I pressed hard, digging my fingers into the muscle. It felt strong, solid, as if the blows had never landed. Carefully, I pulled up the hem of my skirt to see my legs. The fabric was still torn, ragged at the knee where it had ripped. Dried stains marked the cloth, reminders of the blood that had run. But beneath it, my knee was whole. No angry bloom of color, no swelling. My mind raced. These were not the kind of wounds that vanish overnight. I had seen girls in my neighborhood after a beating. They carried their bruises for days, weeks. I had felt the deep ache that comes from bones bruised, muscles torn. Those things do not simply disappear while you sleep. Unless I remembered his touch. The way the pain had fled as if chased by light. The warmth that had spread from that point through my whole body. The sound of his voice, steady and sure, calling me daughter, telling me I was not alone. Tears filled my eyes, hot and clean. He had really been here. The world outside that cell might argue, might deny, might say I was traumatized, hallucinating. But my own flesh told a different story. Where there had been bruises, there was nothing. Where there had been agony, there was peace. My body, which had been the evidence of their power, had now become the evidence of his. A strange strength spread through my chest, not the hard strength of anger, but something quieter, like a foundation being laid under my feet. The fear that had pressed on me like a weight was still there, but it had changed shape. It was smaller. It no longer filled the entire space. I was still in a cell, but I was not a victim waiting to be broken. I was a daughter who had been visited, healed, claimed. The heavy clank of metal jolted me. The sound of a key turning in a lock shattered the fragile stillness. The door groaned as it opened, spilling harsh light from the corridor into the room. Instinctively, I turned my face toward it, blinking against the brightness. The same guard from the day before stood in the doorway. He filled the frame with his broad shoulders, one hand on the edge of the door, the other already reaching out as if to grab me. His expression was the weary annoyance of someone who thinks he knows exactly what he will find. A broken girl on the floor, limp, barely able to stand. Maybe he was even looking forward to the small satisfaction of dragging me out again, reminding himself of his own strength. His eyes found me, not crumpled in the corner, not sprawled in misery, sitting upright, knees drawn in but spine straight, face turned toward him. No swelling, no split lip, no blood smeared across my skin. Just me. Small, yes, but whole. He stopped moving. For a heartbeat he simply stared, his mouth half open. His hand, stretched out to seize my arm, froze in midair. Confusion flickered across his features, quickly chased by something like fear. He stepped closer, squinting, as if he thought the light might be playing tricks on him. His gaze raked over me, looking for the marks he remembered, the bruises on my face, the stiffness in my movements, the way I had hardly been able to hold my own weight. His eyebrows drew together, a deep line forming on his forehead. I pushed myself to my feet. I did it slowly, deliberately, not to provoke him, but to show myself that I could. My hands pressed against the wall for a moment, then left it. I stood fully, without wobbling. My legs supported me as if nothing had happened. The cell suddenly felt too small for the amount of life in my chest. The guard took a step back. It was slight, but I saw it. An instinctive retreat, as if he had unintentionally put his hand into fire and pulled it away. His eyes were wide now. The expression I had seen so many times in men like him, the look of control and superiority, was gone. In its place was something raw, fear. He muttered something under his breath, a curse or a prayer, I could not tell. His eyes flicked to the corners of the cell, as if searching for someone else, some accomplice. There was no one, just me. And yet, he looked as if there were more in the room than he could see. I could almost feel what he was thinking. This is not natural. The girl we threw in here was nearly broken. The blows we gave do not vanish. The bruises do not fade overnight. Something else has touched her. Something stronger than us. In our world, there are only a few explanations for this. Magic, spirits, power. He did not know the name of the one who had sat on the floor with me. He did not know about hands that healed lepers and raised the dead. All he knew was that the woman in front of him did not match his memory, and that the difference made him uneasy in a way no threat from a superior ever had. He lowered the hand he had raised to grab me. He did not want to touch me. Voices echoed faintly from the corridor behind him. A shout, another guard calling his name, the distant ring of a phone. There was a commotion brewing somewhere out of sight, layers of authority making decisions that would change my path. I could not hear the words, only the tones. Urgency, disagreement, something not going according to routine. He glanced back over his shoulder, then at me again. For a moment, his eyes held mine. There was something like accusation in them, but also a strange respect, as if he were facing a fire he could not understand. He reached into the hall and grabbed something from a hook. My veil, torn, stained, the fabric that had been ripped from me in the interrogation room. He threw it at me, as if it burned his hand. It hit my chest and slid down into my hands. "Put that on," he snapped, but his voice was not as steady as he wanted it to be. I obeyed. Not because I was ashamed now, but because I understood that dignity in this moment meant walking out not as a spectacle, but as a woman covered, held together. I wrapped the veil around my hair and neck. My fingers did not tremble. Each movement felt slow, intentional, like a queen putting on her mantle. The voices in the corridor rose. Someone barked an order. I caught a few words. My father's name, references to shame, to influence. Bribe was not a word they used out loud, but it lived in the spaces between sentences. Perhaps money had changed hands. Perhaps someone with higher rank had decided my case was not worth the trouble. Perhaps they simply did not like the feeling that I was no longer just a body they could break. The guard grimaced as if the decision coming down the hallway left a bad taste in his mouth. He jerked his chin toward the door. "Get up! Out!" I was already standing. He stepped aside, flattening himself more against the wall than necessary, as if wanting to create as much distance between us as the corridor allowed. He did not lay a hand on me to push or drag. He did not need to. I walked. We moved quickly through the dim corridor, past other doors that remained closed. The smells of the place followed us, but they seemed farther away now. The concrete under my feet was the same, but I no longer felt as if it owned me. At a junction, instead of turning toward the interrogation rooms or the main offices, he turned the other way. The air grew cooler, fresher. There were fewer lights here, fewer signs of authority. We reached a heavy metal door at the end of a narrow passage. He fumbled with the keys, hands not as sure as they had been before. The lock clicked. The door protested as he shoved it open. A slice of early morning waited on the other side. Pale light, faint sounds of a city waking. The smell of air that had not been trapped between dirty walls. He did not look at me as he spoke. "Go," he said roughly. "Out. And do not come back." The last words were more wish than command. I hesitated on the threshold for one brief second, feeling the difference in the air. Behind me, the weight of the prison. In front of me, the unknown. The guard made an impatient gesture, not stepping closer but urging me from a distance. As if the sooner I crossed that line, the sooner he would be safe from whatever it was that walked with me. I stepped out. Cold morning air hit my face, shocking in its purity. It carried the smells of damp stone, distant smoke from cooking fires, a hint of exhaust, but all of it seemed clean compared to what I had been breathing. The sky above the narrow alley was a pale, washed-out blue, streaked with the first weak rays of sun. Behind me, the door slammed shut. I stood there for a moment in the alleyway, the rough walls on either side, puddles at my feet reflecting fragments of the sky. My torn clothes hung on my whole body. My hair, now covered again, framed a face that bore no trace of the blows it had received. My muscles felt rested. My lungs drew in air without pain. I was outside. I was alive. The urge to run surged up in me, primal and strong, to bolt down the alley, to disappear into the warren of streets, to put as much distance as possible between myself and that door. But another feeling rose with it, stronger, deeper. I was not escaping like a stray animal that had slipped its chain. I had been brought out. I took a breath and chose not to run. I walked. Each step was measured, deliberate. My bare feet slapped softly against the damp ground. My back was straight. My head, though covered, was not bowed in shame. Between the walls of that alley, with the prison door at my back and the open street ahead, I felt a presence beside me as real as the rough stone under my fingers when I brushed the wall. He who had sat on the floor of my cell did not vanish with the light. He walked with me, not as a vision now, not visible to the eyes of those who might pass me on the street, but as a certainty in my chest. My body healed was the mark of his touch. My heart, steadier than it had any right to be, was the echo of his words. Daughter, you are not alone. I have counted every tear. I reached the end of the alley and stepped into the street. People moved about their morning routines, some in a hurry, some slowly, heads down. No one looked twice at a young woman in worn clothes and a veil, slipping into the current of the day. They did not know that, just hours before, I had lain on a prison floor thinking I was forgotten. They did not know I walked now with the dignity of someone who had been claimed. I felt the weight of their indifference, but it did not crush me. For the first time in my life, I understood that my worth was not written in my father's eyes, or in the interrogator's file, or in the whispers of neighbors. It was written in the scars of the one who had touched me. So I did not hurry. I did not look over my shoulder every few seconds. I did not shrink into doorways. I moved forward step by step, as if walking beside a king. Not one of our rulers, distant and harsh, but a king who had chosen the floor of a cell over the comfort of a palace. The cold of the morning wrapped around me, but inside there was a warmth that nothing outside could touch. I was free, and more than free, I belonged. Leaving the prison was not the end of my journey. It was only the first step. I did not go back home. My feet knew the way, but my spirit knew that house was close to me now. I wandered the streets for hours. The same city that had always felt like a cage now stretched around me like a maze. At some point, as the sun climbed higher, I found my way to a place where people like me went when they had nowhere else. A small room above a shop. A whispered address pressed into my hand by a woman at the church office that helped refugees. A knock on a door that opened to faces that did not ask for my papers first. They listened. They did not tell me I was crazy when I spoke of the man in white in my cell. They did not call me liar when I showed them a body without bruises. They quietly rolled up my sleeves, checked my arms, my ribs, my legs, and shook their heads with tears in their eyes. One of them had scars on her own back from lashes. She touched my shoulder and whispered, "Ele faz isso." He does that. Staying was not safe. Rumors spread quickly. A girl arrested for apostasy does not disappear without questions. They told me I had to leave the country, that if I stayed, they would come for me again. The decision tore at me. Leaving meant abandoning everything familiar. But what family was left for me there? The home I had known had already turned me over. So I began another kind of exile. The way out was not a straight road. It was smugglers who smelled of tobacco and desperation, men whose loyalty could be bought and sold like bread. It was nights walking in silence, footsteps crunching over gravel and dust, the outline of mountains black against a star-pricked sky. It was hiding in the back of trucks that stank of fuel and animals, holding my breath whenever we passed a checkpoint. We climbed paths that goats used, narrow strips of rock where one wrong step could send you tumbling into darkness. The air in the mountains was thin and sharp, cutting into my lungs, but I did not complain. I remembered concrete air that smelled of sewage, and each cold breath up there tasted like freedom. We slept on the ground, wrapped in thin blankets that let the wind pierce through. Once, snowflakes drifted down, melting on my face as I lay on my back looking at the sky. My fingers went numb, my lips cracked, my stomach twisted with hunger when food was scarce. But I was not afraid. Fear had been my master for as long as I could remember. Fear of my father's anger, fear of my brother's disappointment, Fear of neighbors' gossip, fear of the state, the police, the walls of the prison. Out there, in the dark, with only strangers and smugglers for company, I should have been terrified. Instead, I carried with me the memory of a hand on my shoulder, a voice in the deepest pit saying, Filha, você não está sozinha? Sometimes, while the others slept, I would sit up and look around at the shadow shapes, at the outlines of rocks and bushes under the stars. The night before prison had felt suffocating, full of threats. These nights were wide, open. When the wind whispered across the stones, it no longer sounded like accusation. It sounded like someone breathing near me. Once, crossing a border at night, we had to run. Lights flashed behind us, voices shouted, dogs barked. People around me stumbled, fell, scrambled to their feet. My heart raced, but the fear did not grip my throat in the same way. Instead, a strange calm wrapped around me. I whispered, Jesus, vamos! And my legs moved, strong, as if he were running beside me, guiding my steps. Eventually, borders gave way to countries where my name was not on any list, where my faith was not a crime to be punished, but a thing that could be spoken out loud. Papers were arranged, interviews were held, forms were signed. Each stage felt unreal, like a story I had read about other people, not something happening to me. Now I live in a place I used to only hear about in whispers. A free country. There are churches on street corners and people walk in and out without looking over their shoulders. Men and women stand side by side, lifting their voices in songs that say, Abertamente o nome de lei. Jesus. Children run between the pews, laughing. No one slaps them for disrespect. No one drags their parents before a committee. I have a Bible that is not hidden under a pillow or disguised as recipes. It sits on a table by my bed, its cover worn now from use, not from being smuggled. I can open it any time. Morning, when the light comes through the window. Afternoon on a park bench. Night, before I sleep. No one will take it from my hands. No one will call it poison. The first time I sang to him in public, my voice shook so much I could hardly form the words. It was a small gathering, not many people. The musician played quietly on a simple guitar. The lyrics were projected on a wall. My eyes blurred as I read them, not because they were complicated, but because I was allowed to read them without fear. My throat closed, and when I opened my mouth, only a thin sound came at first. Then I remembered the cell, the smell of roses where there had only been filth, the warmth that had wrapped itself around my broken body, the hand on my bruised shoulder, the word Filha, the tears that he had counted. My voice grew stronger. I sang to the one who had sat on the prison floor with me, and each note felt like a step away from that place, and, at the same time, a thread tying me back to the holy ground it had become. I was not singing in defiance of my country anymore. I was singing in gratitude to my Savior. New life does not erase old scars. There are nights when I wake up with my heart pounding, my hands gripping the sheets as if they were the thin mattress of my old cell. The dark in my room feels, por alguns segundos, just as thick as the dark behind those walls. I hear echoes of boots in the hallway, doors slamming, voices demanding that I choose. In those moments, fear tries to climb back into my bed. I lie there, breathing shallow, my mind caught between two worlds. Then I remember. The smell changing from rot to roses, the way the light had filled the corners, the softness of his voice, calling me daughter. I remember his hand on my shoulder. I remember waking with no bruises. I whisper, sometimes out loud, sometimes only in my heart, Você veio até mim lá. Você está aqui também. You came to me there. You are here too. Slowly the panic loosens its grip. The room takes shape again. The walls are not closing in. The door is not locked from the outside. My Bible is on the table, where I left it. Sometimes I get up and open it, not because I need to prove anything, but because I want to sit in that light again. The cell is far behind me, yet it lives inside me as the place where I learned who he really is. I still do not understand why some are rescued and others are not. Why I walked out of that prison while others remain. Why my bruises vanished overnight and some sisters carry their scars on their skin for the rest of their lives. I do not pretend to have answers that belong only to God. What I know is this: He is real, not an idea, not a foreign philosophy, not a weak prophet whose words can be silenced with laws and guns. He is the man who walks into locked cells without keys, who sits on cold floors beside girls no one else sees. He is the Lord who can calm seas and interrogators and trembling hearts with a word. He is the shepherd who leaves 99 safe sheep to crawl into the filth to find the one that is bleeding. No wall is too thick for him to pass through. Not the concrete of my cell, not the traditions that keep women silent, not the shame imposed by families, not the iron bars of a regime. They locked me away, convinced that their walls were final. He appeared in the center of that certainty, as easily as light enters a room when a window is opened. This is what I want to say to you, especially if you are a woman listening in a place where you are told you are worth less. He sees you when you sit on the floor of your bathroom and cry quietly so no one will hear. When the words spoken to you cut deeper than any belt. When you hide your bruises behind long sleeves and practice smiles. When you lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if anyone knows what you are going through. He sees every tear. You may feel invisible in your own house, in your own town, in a world run by men who decide your fate. You may feel like no one would come looking if you disappeared. I know that feeling. I lived it. But Jesus does not overlook you. He is not impressed by the ones who talk loudest, who hold the power, who write the laws. He is drawn to the ones crushed under those powers. He is not afraid of your prison, whether it is made of concrete and iron or of expectations and fear. He will step inside it, sit on the floor with you, and call you by the name no one else uses for you with love. Filha, daughter. I used to wonder if he could cross borders, if the Jesus I met under my blanket in that tightly controlled country would know how to find me in a cell where his name was forbidden. I do not wonder that anymore. I have seen him move through locked doors that no key opened. I have felt his hand where only blows had touched before. They took my home, they took my family, they took my dignity, they tried to take my faith, they tried to beat the name of Jesus out of me. They tried to convince me that he had abandoned me, that I was foolish to trust him, that I was alone. But they could not take my Jesus. They could not reach the place inside me where he had written, "Daughter." They could not erase the memory of his presence in that filthy cell. They could not reverse the healing he did on my body. They could not undo the truth that, when everyone else stepped back from me in disgust or fear, he stepped closer, and he was worth it all.